always hated this place.
Are you getting warm?
Hi, welcome to my last review of a Bond movie. It really blows my mind to think that this film series has actually been around for half a century. Through all of these, I think I wove a timeline of sorts showing how society impacted the film industry and how the Bond films reflect, and in some ways predict, all the trends in media and pop culture to this very day. So join me for my final addition to the 007 Body Count. The last of these films I'll review is Skyfall, the most recent and perhaps the highest grossing at the box office of all Bond films. It marked 50 years to the date 007 first appeared in the cinemas, way back in 1962. As a matter of fact, the press conference announcing the cast for this movie was held 50 years to the date Sean Connery was announced to star in Dr. No. The title song by Adele became the first within the Bond film series to actually win an Oscar. This was also the first Bond movie to be shown in theaters in IMAX, despite not being filmed in that format. A huge fan of the Bond films, Sam Mendes based his vision for Skyfall on all the classic images associated with 007. Many themes and motifs that have been abandoned over the years are brought back in a way that re-established James Bond in ways older generations of filmgoers remember, while maintaining the pace of today's more modern action films. For instance, the opening scene is something very similar to the earlier movies. The main character is thought to be dead right before the title sequence, a reminder of how 00's agents go hand in hand with death 24/7. The concept of that was actually thought up by Harry Saltzman for the Bond films way back in the early 60s, which I actually talked about in my review of From Russia with Love.
Not enough excitement in Istanbul.
I've been reassigned. Temporary suspension from fieldwork.
Really?
Something to do with killing 007.
Well, you gave it your best shot.
It was hardly my best shot.
Familiar characters thought to be abandoned since the reboot of the series are brought back as well. Naomi Harris, to whom you think is merely a field agent, turns out to be none other than Miss Moneypenny, and she gives the character a new dynamic edge as someone all too familiar with who Bond is, explaining the, quote, usual repartee, to quote M in the film From Russia with Love, that they share in the office.
Now, looking at Silver's computer, it seems to me he's done a number of slightly unusual things. He's established fail-safe protocols to wipe the memory if there's any attempt to access certain files. Only about 6 people in the world could program safeguards like that.
Of course there are. Can you get past them?
I invented them.
A Brave New World introduces a brave new Q. Ben Whishaw plays the character amazingly well in a very similar vein akin to Desmond Llewellyn, in a sense that these two would always have a personality clash. Yet it made for a great precursor, foreshadowing the best signature moments of the best of the Bond movies. He almost reminds me of a very young Roddy McDowall, actually, if you really think about it, while still really, trust me, making the character his own.
I know I can't do this job forever, but I'll be damned if I'm going to leave the department in worse shape than I found it.
You've had a great run. You should leave with dignity.
Oh, to hell with dignity. I'll leave when the job's done.
Judi Dench appears one last time as M. As this time MI6 is being phased out, we find her character being backed into a corner. This is the one Bond movie where M doesn't just debrief 007 in the usual parts of the film. The Bond villain targets her with the intention of dissolving MI6, making threats on the internet, and bombing the main headquarters. Only someone with the acting prowess like Dench could give a performance so convincing for a character audiences became used to, as part of the usual landscape of the supporting type for the main character within the history of Bond films. Therein lies the plot between her and the chief villain. a cyber terrorist by the name of Silva, who turns out to be ex-MI6. Thought to be killed on a mission, Oscar winner Javier Bardem plays a villain motivated by revenge and global domination through social media, exposing agents in the field blowing their cover. Bardem actually had the script transposed to Spanish in order to really make the character his. This is probably the only Bond film since GoldenEye that the main villain was actually thought to be dead and an ex-00 agent. The Bond girl in this film is very mysterious. Model and actress Bernice Marlowe portrays someone with a very shady past, with Silva being her ticket out of it all. Entering a world of espionage and leading assassination hits is very similar in line with the books in the sense that Bond's presence in her life means certain death, all just to give 007 a lead to find Silva. The climax brings Bond back to his roots, to the home he grew up in, when trying to give cover to M, being met by Kincaid, an innkeeper who knew Bond as a new orphan there many years ago. Not too shabby on the part of Albert Finney, as we believe him to be a mentor and surrogate father figure to the main character from a while ago. They go back to basics in combat, using deception and surprise as they get ready for the final confrontation, with a kickoff that takes audiences back to the early 1960s. The great thing about this part of the movie is how resourceful the main characters are. Cornered, fighting back to the bitter end, despite the Aston Martin's last gasp, there are no gadgets, and it's all about ingenuity and endurance. Even as M dies at the end, in a scene very reminiscent of the final ending of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, it's fine that there's, quote, more work to be done, as Malroy takes up the role as M. It'll be interesting to see how Ralph Fiennes assumes the role in the next film, as with Skyfall he effectively puts his character through an arc. In the beginning, we see that he really just wants MI6 put down, but now as the new M, seeing the need for it after what he went through in the story, we see a totally different turnaround. I think that with Skyfall, the one thing that really is etched in my mind is the fact that I saw it in the movie theaters because of the way this movie looks in HD. Now, Bond films are always known for their exotic locations, but for some reason with this film in particular, that was amplified because of the way this looked in high definition. I mean, it just looked incredible. It blew me away. A lot of the scenes, I think, are based on atmosphere, and earlier on I also said, maybe in one of my other reviews, that one of the films were based on atmosphere. I mean, they all are, to some extent. I mean, adventure and action, but, there's got to be a place to happen, right? But when you saw it in high def, especially with this film, there are just certain key scenes that just really stood out even more because of the way it looked. I mean, it looked absolutely incredible, breathtaking. On a final note, it's only fitting that the Bond movie being released 50 years to the date of the first of the series should be the highest grossing of all. Every Bond film I've ever seen, for the most part, has been captivating and fun to watch. They still draw at the box office despite the changing times. Up to a point, I personally had read all the books, had the whole catalog on VHS, and of course even had the 50th anniversary Blu-ray box set. Now, if anything, everybody and their mother's actually been doing reviews on pretty much all the Bond films. There's so many that you could see, and they get thousands of hits, much more than I can ever give. I mean, I just really did it because I really enjoy it. I was always a big fanatic about the books and the films. And to tell you the truth, my take on it, all I could say is that when it comes to excitement, thrills, and adventure, nobody does it better.